All right, so I got a second thought this morning. And this thought actually comes from a conversation I had with a man in the jail about 2 weeks ago. And we were kind of having some conversations that day about the apostles. And I was talking to him and two other inmates about basically God's ability to change any life. I was telling them how that regardless of their decisions that put them in jail there and what they had done to be there, that didn't have to be the end. I was telling them how, there was many examples in the Bible of men, women, both, that their lives were drastically changed by Jesus. And I think about now even more coming to my mind. It's like, man, I wish I could have thought of these things that day. But either way, while having that conversation, of course I bring up Paul, and I'm like, man, I cracked the joke that, he was changed so drastically that he had an identity crisis and his name changed from Saul to Paul. And I try to make it funny like that, and it's a joke I laugh at. Maybe nobody else laughs at it, but I always like the joke. But it's meant to be funny, but in a serious way. That was such a drastic change. To change from murderer to one of the greatest disciples, that's huge. And so I was using that to kind of tell these guys this, and he was like, oh, hey, I got this paper, that the chaplain brought me. Let me show it to you. So he brings me this paper, and it's got the deaths of all the disciples, how they were killed. Now, understand, some of these are biblical, some of these are in the Bible, and they're specifically talked about in the Bible, and others come from other works, other books, other things that tie into or reference certain parts of the Bible or certain certain disciples and things like that. There's one book, I think it's called Eusebius. It's supposed to be part of a lost work that references James. And so as we went over that little paper there, and we talked about the different disciples, I asked the one guy, I said, if you could be any of these disciples, I said, who would you be? Real quick. He said, John. I want to be John the Baptist. I was like, that's a good one. That's a good one. And my mind was already thinking about it when I asked it. So I already had a little heads up there. I'd kind of thought it through for a few seconds, and he goes, well, what about you, Mr. Burkhardt? He goes, who would you want to be? And I said, I'd want to be James, the son of Zebedee. And he was like, yeah, that's a good one. I said, no, think about it. I said, I would want to be him for one reason. If, in fact, the story of his beheading and his faith being so strong that a guard knelt down beside him and was beheaded, as is told in other books, not in the Bible, they seem to match up. They seem to pair up, and that's great. But I was like, man, think about it. I said, think about having a faith, one, that you're even willing to be beheaded over it. The fact that you're willing to kneel down and allow someone to take a sword and behead you over your faith for Christ. One, that's amazing. Second part, imagine your faith and your testimony being so strong that a lost person, another sinner, but lost, not a Christian, sees your faith so much that he's willing to, on the spot, become a Christian and take the same punishment. To say, man, you are so dedicated, you exude God's love so much, I want that. And for that person, knowing that by becoming a Christian, they're going to die. He knew that. He knew And he was willing to kneel down beside James and be beheaded. That's a testimony, y'all. Like, that is a testimony. I don't know many people on earth that if we were in that place again right now, which it's coming, but if we were in that place right now where it was a crime to be a Christian, it was a crime to serve God, I don't know many people that have such a testimony that another person would be willing to kneel down beside them and say, I'm going to follow Christ, I'm going to follow your testimony, and I'm going to suffer the same punishment. I don't know many people with that. I don't have that. I don't think my faith, I don't think my testimony is so strong that I could convince somebody to kneel down beside me and be beheaded for the love of Christ. I don't think I do. I know a couple people that I do believe had such an impact that men could see their faith and their testimony and say, hey, I need some of that. There's a few out there. There were a few out there. I know a few, a couple of them very, very personally. I know my grandpa, I believe, had such a faith and such a walk and a testimony that I believe somebody would have knelt down beside him and said, I want to follow his lead. I want to follow what he's talking about. I want to serve the God that he serves. And there's others, but that one's on my mind. I believe, men like Billy Graham back in the day would have had somebody willing to say, hey, I want to follow that lead. I want to follow the God that he's talking about. There's others, but I'll just stop with that. I want to be James. I want to be like James, the son of Zebedee. I want to have a faith so strong, like I said, first and foremost, that I'm even willing to die for my faith. That was, I don't know, it just struck me. It just struck me that, that's something that if I could choose like which one to be, I'd want to be James, and then there's no wrong answer there. I don't believe, I'm sure you can find reasons to not want to be any of them. And I'm sure you can find reasons to want to be all of them. There's reasons behind everything, but it's just, that was just a quick thought, that I had, having that conversation with them. And so I hope maybe you can think about that. Think about, if you could be any of the disciples, if your life could mimic any of the disciples, if you could serve like any of the disciples, who would you want to be? Who would you want to be? Comment on the video. Let me know. Let's talk about it. And again, I understand that story isn't in the Bible. I understand that's from another writing that references the Bible and references James and things like that. So I know that's not necessarily biblical. Obviously we know he was beheaded, but we don't know about we know he was killed by the king. We don't know through the Bible that the Roman guard stood, knelt down beside him, but it seems pretty credible. And that's the kind of story that should be shared, is that kind of faith and testimony and walk. So anyways, that's the end of my thought. Just wanted to share. Love y'all. Have a good one.